I drove back to Eagle River the night the snow started early, the kind of snow that eats the sound out of the world. My parents' old house sat at the edge of the trees, same as always, like nothing had changed since the day they were gone. The windows were dark. The roof groaned under the weight of the ice, and when I stepped inside, the air still smelled like the last winter we'd spent there together. I didn't plan on staying long, just sort through their things, close the place up for good. But the moment I walked into the living room and saw the old TV sitting in the corner, everything in me stopped for a second. That TV was part of the only family tradition we never talked about out loud. Once a year, always on the same day, a nameless channel would appear, no number, no logo. Static first, then a broadcast from somewhere that wasn't here. I remember sitting on the carpet as a kid, watching my parents lean in close, like the TV was giving them instructions. 27 minutes of the same footage every year. News anchors talking about missing towns, soldiers guarding something off-screen, storms that never hit our world. And then the final second would change. A different image each time. A map, a hallway, a forest, a white circle that looked like a door. I never forgot that second. But I grew up, moved out, told myself it was just some weird Alaskan broadcast anomaly or a glitch in an old tuner. Standing in that quiet house again made all of it feel too close. I dropped my bags and walked over to the TV. Dust covered the screen. The plug had been pulled out since the day they died. I didn't touch it. Didn't even breathe near it. I just stared at it for a little too long, the way you stare at something you hope is dead. Outside, the snow thickened, the kind that paints the sky white. I turned away to take off my jacket. That's when the TV flashed, just once. A burst of white, sharp, clean, like a camera flash going off inside the glass. It lasted less than a blink, maybe a tenth of a second, no static, no hum, just a silent flash that lit up the whole room. I froze. The TV was still unplugged. A long breath scraped out of me. My eyes watered from the shock, or maybe the cold. I waited for another flash, or a noise, or anything. Nothing happened. The screen stayed black. I told myself it was a reflection, maybe headlights from passing cars, except there were no passing cars, not in this weather, not on this road. I rubbed my eyes with my sleeve. "It's nothing," I whispered to myself, but my chest felt tight in that familiar way I hated, because I knew how it always began. It always starts small. I spent the first full day cleaning the house, or at least trying to. The place wasn't a mess, just frozen in time. My father's tools were still arranged in that perfect straight line on his workbench. My mother's old winter coat still hung by the door. Everything felt too intact, like the house didn't know they were gone. Outside, Eagle River looked the same as every winter I remembered. Quiet, cold, the sky dim even at noon. You don't get much signal out here. Cell service flickers on and off depending on where the mountains let it through. Even the radio crackles like it's straining to hear itself. By the afternoon, I stepped onto the porch to take a break from the dust. My fingers were numb, and I almost missed the sound of someone walking up the path through the snow. I looked up. It was Reuben Calloway. He hadn't changed much. Same heavy jacket, same beard that looked like it was carved out of the cold itself. He stopped at the bottom of the steps. "Thought I saw your truck," he said. I nodded. "Hey, Reuben." He eyed the house. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" "Yeah," I said. Strange is one word. Reuben stepped up, boots crunching on the stairs. He didn't ask to come in. He just walked to the living room window and stared at the TV like it was an animal that might wake up any second. "Still got that old tuner?" he asked. I shrugged. "Somewhere. I haven't touched it." He exhaled through his nose, slow. Not like it ever behaved like a real broadcast anyway. I leaned on the doorway. You mean the annual thing? His jaw tightened. We never figured out what that thing was, your dad and I. He stopped, scratched his beard. It didn't look like any TV signal I'd seen. No carrier wave, no station identification, just a pattern. A test pattern? Yeah, but not for our devices, like it was testing. Something else. I didn't like the way he said it, like he'd been carrying that thought for years. He didn't stay long. Reuben was like that, appeared when something was bothering him, disappeared before he had to explain it. After he left, the house felt colder. The next morning, I called a local repair guy, Sean Mercer, someone Reuben had mentioned once. He arrived in a beat-up blue truck, toolbox rattling in the back, breath fogging before he even reached the porch. Inside, he kneeled in front of the TV and whistled. "This thing's ancient," he said, tapping the metal casing. "Where'd you even get it?" "My dad bought it before I was born." "Man," he popped the panel open. "They don't build them like this anymore. You want it working again?" "I want the tuner working," I said. "The old one, if you can." He gave me a long look, like he wanted to ask why, but he didn't. He just set to work. The hours passed slow. Snow piled up against the windows. The cabin groaned as the wind pressed into it. Sean rewired the tuner, replaced a couple of fuses, and tightened everything until it looked almost new. When he finally stood up, wiping his hands, he said, "All right, should power on, but I can't promise you'll get anything out here." "That's fine," I said. He hesitated at the door. "If you're trying to pick up whatever it was your parents watched, just be careful with this thing. Old signals get weird." He left after that, tires spinning on the icy road. I locked the door behind him, and for the first time, the house felt too quiet. Not peaceful, quiet in a way that makes you listen for something you don't want to hear. For the next day or two, life settled into a rhythm. I fixed what needed fixing. I ate canned soup. I shoveled the walkway even though no one else came by. The cabin creaked at night, the trees groaned under the cold, and sometimes a burst of static buzzed through the living room before cutting out. Everything felt normal enough, normal for here. But on the third night, just after midnight, the TV turned on by itself. I was in the kitchen making tea when the sudden glow hit the wall. A deep, heavy static spilled from the speakers, not the usual kind. This was denser, layered, almost like it had depth, like something inside it was breathing. I stepped closer. "Not tonight," I muttered, reaching for the power button. Before my finger touched the plastic, the static lifted for a split second, and a frame appeared. Just one. A white round door, perfectly circular, lit from behind like a surgical lamp. In front of it stood two soldiers in gear I didn't recognize. Behind them, blurred but unmistakably tall, was the silhouette of someone wearing an old diver's suit. My breath caught. The frame snapped back into static before I could blink. The TV clicked itself off. I stared at my reflection in the dark glass, heart thudding in my chest, breath fogging the screen. I should have unplugged it right then, but I didn't. I just stood there, caught between what I saw and what I hoped I hadn't. The cabin felt too small. The snow outside felt too loud, and all I could think was that the day hadn't come yet. The annual broadcast wasn't supposed to happen, not for another week. And somehow, something was already here. I didn't sleep much after the doorframe flash. I kept telling myself it was a malfunction or ghost static or anything else. But the truth sat on my tongue like metal. That frame wasn't random. It felt intentional, like something testing the waters from the other side of the glass. 3 days passed. The snow thickened into a wall around the house. The wind pushed against the siding in waves. Every night I waited. Every night the TV stayed black. Until the night it didn't. It was just after 2 a.m., the kind of hour that feels thin and hollow. I was lying on the couch, half awake, half frozen, when the TV clicked on with that low thump of electricity. Static filled the room, not the shallow kind, not the usual white fuzz. This static had layers like a storm inside the screen. I sat up slowly. "Okay. Breathe," I whispered. And then the static receded like a tide pulling back. The broadcast began. It was exactly how I remembered it. The same anchors with perfectly still expressions, the same strange, dust-colored newsroom, the same map behind them showing towns I'd never heard of, places supposedly evacuated, vanished, or absorbed by incidents never reported in our world. The footage never aged, never updated. Same people, same clothes, same everything, year after year. The male anchor spoke first. "Reports continue from Sector 9. Entire communities remain missing, with no remaining structure or inhabitants." The female anchor followed. "Military containment still holds at the white door perimeter." She turned her head slightly, too slightly, like a puppet moved by careful hands. Then the screen shifted to footage of soldiers. They stood in heavy gear around a huge white circle embedded into the ground, a door without hinges, a door that didn't open by normal means. Behind the soldiers, flickering shapes moved like heat distortions. Everything was exactly as it always was. My heartbeat was almost steady, until it wasn't. The broadcast continued its usual 27-minute loop, every frame identical to every year before. I knew the timing by heart. I almost knew the anchor's breaths. And then the moment came, the final second. I leaned forward, but it didn't flash a single image. It opened. 1 second stretched into 2, then 3, then 6, then 8. Static drifted around the edges like frost. The frame itself seemed to pulse. And then, inside the elongated second, the camera angle shifted. The soldier stepped aside. The white door in the ground glowed brighter. A tall, shadowed figure moved in the background. My stomach sank. I already knew what it was. The diver. It always stayed in the background, always walking, always drifting like it didn't fit into the footage, like it wasn't meant to be recorded. But this time, it stopped. And then it did something it had never done. It turned, slowly, deliberately. Head tilted like the helmet weighed 80 pounds. The visor faced the camera. Faced me. Even through the grain, I felt its focus slide into my chest like a hook. A sound crackled through the speakers. Not a voice at first, just distortion shaped like syllables. Then the distortion formed something I understood. "Daniel," my breath caught. "Daniel, Huxley." I stumbled backward, hitting the table with my hip. The TV flickered, glitched, stretched the image out of proportion like it was trying to push the diver through the glass. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." The screen split into 3 layers of static. The diver's outline jittered between them, growing, shrinking, flickering like a candle in a wind tunnel. Then everything went black. Completely. The house seemed to inhale, and somewhere outside, near the tree line, I heard snow compress under a heavy step. I crept to the window, palms sweaty despite the cold. The moonlight barely touched the forest, but enough to cast long shadows across the fresh snow. Something stood among the trees, tall, still, facing the house, but the shape wasn't clear, just a vertical outline, darker than the forest, darker than anything that should be out there. I backed away from the window. The TV clicked on again. This time, there was no static, no news anchors, no soldiers. The footage was shaky, handheld. Someone was walking through deep snow, each step matching the sound I'd just heard outside. The camera tilted down, heavy footprints sank inches deep. Tilted up, toward a cabin. My cabin. I felt the air drain out of my lungs. "This isn't live," I whispered. "It can't be live." But it wasn't live. It wasn't recorded either. It was perspective. The TV was showing me a first-person view from the creature outside. The diver was filming through its own eyes. The camera, its vision, jerked closer. My window filled the screen. My silhouette moved inside the glass. A warped breath crackled through the speakers. Frame 27. The screen bent inward like something was pushing from the other side. Open. I slapped the power button. The screen stayed on. I pulled the plug from the wall. The screen stayed on. Static seeped around the edges of the diver's POV like fog on glass. The image warped, stretching my cabin window across the display as though the TV was trying to merge two locations, its world and mine. "No, stop," I said, shaking. The sound from the TV deepened, almost like a low underwater hum. The diver's visor filled the screen until it was all I could see, dark, smooth, reflecting nothing. Something outside the cabin exhaled, long, slow, heavy. The broadcast crackled again. Adjusting, the diver's head tilted on the screen. Target locked. And in that moment, with the snow falling too quietly outside and the TV glowing too bright, I understood something I never should have understood. The broadcast wasn't repeating. It wasn't glitching. It wasn't broadcasting at all. It was calibrating. To me. To my location. To the only viewer still alive who had ever seen all 27 minutes. I felt it in my spine, in my pulse, in the way the air in the cabin seemed to bend. The broadcast wasn't just showing me a world that shouldn't exist. It was adjusting itself, reaching for the one person watching. For me. The cabin snapped cold the moment I unplugged the TV. It shouldn't have stayed on. It shouldn't have done any of what it just did. I stood there, hands still on the plug, breath frosting in front of the screen's glow. My heart crawled up my throat. Outside, the wind died. Completely. The silence that followed felt wrong. Not peaceful, constructed, like someone had muted the world. Then I heard it. A step. Heavy, slow, pressing the snow deep enough that I felt the vibration in the floorboards. Another step. Closer. I backed away from the window, keeping my eyes on the TV. Even unplugged, it showed the diver's first-person view pushing through a curtain of falling snow. Each movement on the screen synced with the sound outside. Step for step, breath for breath, the screen flickered. A low hum rose from the speakers, mechanical, underwater, wrong. Frame 27 is open. The voice felt like a needle sliding between my ribs. "No," I whispered. Another step landed against the snow, heavier this time. The cabin walls shivered. I dropped to the floor behind the couch, forcing myself to breathe through my nose so the sound wouldn't shake. My chest burned, every muscle pulled tight enough to snap. The footsteps stopped just outside the window. For a second, one horrible second, I thought it was looking in, that its visor was inches from the glass, fogging it from the outside. Static crackled inside the cabin as the TV jumped to a closer angle. The diver's hand, thick gloves, metal plates, reached out and braced itself on a wooden wall. My wall. The broadcast wasn't watching my house, it was inside my house. The diver's point of view shifted downward, snow on boots, snow on steps, close, so close. I swallowed hard. "I can't stay," I whispered. My breath felt like a confession. I crawled toward the back of the cabin, moving slow so the floorboards wouldn't creak. Every few seconds, the static on the TV spiked, like the signal was searching for me. When I reached the back door, I hesitated. The cold on the other side bit through the wood like teeth. My fingers trembled as I wrapped them around the latch. One small breath, one small prayer. I threw the door open and ran. The cold slapped the air out of my lungs. Snow kicked up around my legs as I sprinted across the backyard, boots slipping on ice. The world blurred. Trees, shadows, flakes of snow drifting sideways like static. Don't look back. Don't look back. I looked back. Through the kitchen window, the TV flickered bright white, then dark, then white again, as if the signal was pulsing like a heartbeat. And behind the glass, a tall shadow passed. The diver was inside. I ran harder. The ground sloped down toward the frozen clearing near Knik River. My feet pounded the snow, legs shaking. My breath cut sharp lines in the cold. The shadows between the trees shifted, stretched, recoiled like they didn't want to be near the thing behind me. I risked a glance over my shoulder. A shape stepped through the back door of the cabin, too tall, too still, silhouette bending the darkness around it. My skin crawled. I sprinted the last stretch to where my dad's old truck sat under a half-buried tarp. My hands fumbled with the frozen fabric. The tarp tore, sending crystals of ice scattering through the air. Come on, come on! I yanked the driver's door open and scrambled inside. The keys were already in the ignition. My dad always left them there in winter. I slammed my hand onto the starter. The engine coughed, sputtered. No, please! I pressed the gas lightly. The truck roared awake. Headlights cut across the clearing, and in the far edge of the beam, at the tree line, a tall figure stopped moving. It didn't hide. It didn't retreat. It watched me, always watching. I threw the truck into gear and tore across the snow-packed ground. The rear tires fishtailed. The steering wheel jerked in my hands. The cabin shrank behind me. The diver stayed at the tree line, head tilted slightly, as if calculating. Then it stepped forward. Just one step. Enough to let me know it wasn't done. Enough to let me know it didn't need to run to catch me. The road leading out of the clearing was coated in ice. Branches clawed the windows as I forced the truck between them, tires grinding against uneven ground. The headlights cut tunnels through the dark, narrow, suffocating tunnels. My breath fogged the cabin. My hands shook. The heater wheezed, barely pushing warm air. When I hit the main road, I didn't slow down. I kept driving toward Anchorage, toward anything that wasn't this. But the road felt too quiet, too empty. Snow drifted across the asphalt in long white streaks. The mountains loomed black, unmoving shapes that swallowed the moonlight. The truck rattled over frozen patches. I checked the rearview mirror. At first, I saw nothing. Then something leaned out from the tree line 50 yards back. The diver stepped onto the road. Straight into the center of the headlight's fading reach. Its figure flickered, like half of it was in this world, the other half somewhere else. The suit glinted. The helmet visor reflected nothing. No face, no eyes, just me. Only me. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. "Stay back," I whispered, like that would mean anything. The diver didn't move. It just watched, head tilted slightly, almost curious, while snow slid around its boots without landing. I pressed the gas harder. The truck surged forward into the night. For a few minutes, maybe 5, maybe 10, I felt like I'd outrun it. The road carried me through the dark, smooth and quiet. My heartbeat steadied. My breath evened. Maybe distance mattered. Maybe the signal had limits. But then the radio turned on. By itself, a burst of static filled the cabin. Not radio static, TV static, deep, dense, layered, the same rhythm I recognized from the broadcast. I reached for the dial. The static rose in pitch, drowning the engine noise. Then a voice tore through it. Frames 27. Remains open. My throat tightened. The diver didn't need to be behind me. The signal was already inside the truck. The radio popped. The dash lights flickered. The static bent into a low underwater hum. In the rearview mirror, far behind, I saw a faint shape in the snow. Tall, thin, moving slow, too slow for the distance it covered. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The truck skidded across the ice. The tires fought for grip. The headlights bounced across the black road, painting the world in stuttering flashes. Snow fell harder, heavier, like the sky was closing in. I kept driving, faster. Trying not to think about the voice, trying not to think about the broadcast, trying not to think about the fact that the diver wasn't chasing me with its body. It was chasing me with the signal, and signals don't get tired. Signals don't slow down. Signals don't stop. I glanced once more at the mirror. The tree line behind me shifted in a way trees shouldn't shift. Something stepped out of it, just a silhouette now, tall, perfectly still. Dead center on the road, waiting. The truck couldn't take much more. The engine rattled like bolts were shaking loose, and the frozen air cut through the vents even with the heat on full blast. My eyes burned from the static still echoing in my head. Every mile I drove, the radio hummed with that underwater tone, steady, patient, tracking me. I needed somewhere the signal couldn't reach, somewhere high, somewhere shielded, and there was only one place like that anywhere near here. The old weather station at the edge of the Chugach Mountains. I remembered it from childhood trips. My dad pointing up toward the ridge as we passed it on the road, telling me the station used to track wind patterns before it was shut down. Concrete, reinforced, buried wiring so old no modern signal bothered with it anymore. I took the next icy turn onto the unmaintained service road and felt the truck bounce hard as it crawled over frozen ruts. Snow swallowed the tires until only the headlights could keep the darkness away. The road twisted like a tired spine, climbing higher into the mountains. Static hit the radio again, louder. "Not now," I whispered. The diver wasn't behind me, but the signal was. By the time I reached the station, the wind had turned brutal. The entire structure looked like a block of dead concrete dropped onto the mountain. The door hung crooked on one hinge, rusted orange around the edges. Broken observation dishes lay half buried in the snow like bones. I killed the engine and just sat for a moment, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, breath fogging the glass. "Get out," I told myself. "Move." I forced the door open and stumbled into the storm. Snow blasted sideways, stinging my face raw as I fought through it. Each step felt like a bad dream, heavy, slow, unsteady. The world was white noise, but I made it inside. The door slammed shut behind me, muffling the wind. Darkness swallowed the room until my flashlight flickered alive. I swept the beam across cracked walls, loose wires, a table covered with old weather logs. The air smelled metallic, untouched. I slid down against the wall, chest heaving, trying to swallow down the panic. It didn't want to go down. The signal still hummed in my skull. A low vibration, not sound, not thought, just pressure. Like someone tapping the inside of my mind from far away. "Stop," I whispered. "Just stop." But it didn't. It wouldn't. When I could finally breathe again, I dug into my backpack and pulled out the old cassette case my father kept, the one labeled with years instead of titles. He'd recorded every annual broadcast, every single one. As a kid, I wasn't allowed to watch the tapes. I thought it was because they were too fragile or too weird. Now I understood there was another reason entirely. I set my flashlight on the table and loaded the first tape into a dusty portable player. For a moment, I wondered if it would even work after all these years. It did. Static hissed. The familiar loop began, anchors delivering dead news from places that weren't real. I fast-forwarded to the final second. It flashed a map, a cluster of coordinates across a white background, handwritten numbers in the corners, my father's handwriting, trying to decode something he didn't understand. Next tape. Another final second. This one showed a hallway, flickering lights, a metal floor with letters I didn't recognize. Next tape. This one showed nothing but a white circle that pulsed like a heartbeat. I kept going. Tape after tape, year after year. The final seconds were never random, never decorative, never artistic. They were specific, they were structured, they were pointing at something. By the time I reached the last recording, my hands had gone numb from more than the cold. I hit play. Static washed the room before the familiar anchors faded into focus. My father had recorded this one from the very same living room I'd been sitting in a week ago. The furniture behind him looked exactly the same. Mom's voice echoed faintly off camera. My father zoomed in slightly, trying to catch the final second, and when it finally appeared, I nearly dropped the player. It wasn't a map, or a hallway, or a door. It was our house. The same angle I had seen through the window that night, the diver standing at the edge of the tree line. My father's nervous breath caught on the tape. My mother whispered something sharp, fear, panic, pleading. The image flickered, zoomed, warped, and then my father said something I'd never heard in his voice before. "It's for us this year." I gripped the sides of the player until my nails hurt. My breath fogged the cold air. It's for us. Not for the towns disappearing, not for the soldiers, not for anyone on the broadcast, for my family. The signal had picked them before, just like it picked me now. I replayed the recording, heart pounding. The final second, the diver, the house, the tree line. Every frame of that second was shaped like a target. And suddenly, the pieces clicked. The broadcast wasn't changing the final second for artistic effect. It wasn't glitching. It wasn't random. It was locating. The final second was a locator signal, a scan, a ping, a lock-on from a place that shouldn't exist, a way to bind the broadcast to a viewer's physical position. The diver didn't walk across Alaska. It didn't need to. It traveled through signal pathways, piggybacking on whatever device caught its broadcast. The moment you watched long enough, the moment it got that last second past your eyes, it knew exactly where you were. My parents never watched out of curiosity. They watched to keep the signal attached to them year after year, so it would never shift to me. A shield made of their own fear. And when they died, the signal lost the lock, which meant it wandered. And when I came back home and watched, even a little, it locked onto me instead. I gripped the tape player so hard it shook in my hands. "No," I whispered. No, this can't be right." But it was. Everything about the broadcast made sense now. Why the diver turned toward the camera this year. Why my name crackled through the static. Why the first-person perspective had been aimed at my cabin. I wasn't just watching the broadcast was watching me. And worse, it had adjusted, it had chosen. The final piece of truth hit me like a crack of ice underfoot. The broadcast only needed one viewer, just one. Whoever watched the full signal, whoever let the final second enter their vision, became the opening point for frame 27. A doorway, a coordinate, a lighthouse shining into the dark where the diver waited. And now the light was mine. I pulled away from the table and paced the room, breath shaking out of me in ragged clouds. The walls felt too small, the shadows too deep. The wind outside scraped against the siding like claws dragging over metal. I had to run. I had to leave the coverage area, get out of whatever radius the broadcast could reach, but when I moved toward the door, the radio in my pocket vibrated, once like a heartbeat. A thin veil of static leaked from the speaker, not loud, not urgent, just there, waiting, following. I shut it off. It turned back on. I pulled the batteries out. Static kept buzzing. I dropped it and kicked it across the floor. The static grew louder. I pressed my hands against my face, fingers shaking against my skin. There was no running from a signal, not a signal that could ride storms or electricity or memory. But I had to try. I grabbed my coat, shoved the tapes into my bag, and forced the weather station door open as the wind howled back into the room. I stepped out into the white void. Snow whipped sideways. The world narrowed to footprints and breath. I didn't know where the diver was, but I knew this. If I stayed put, the signal would catch up. If I ran, it would follow. But running gave me a chance, however thin, to stay ahead of whatever the final second was trying to open. I pulled my hood tight and walked into the storm. Everything inside me trembled, because the signal wasn't behind me. It was already inside the world around me, and I didn't know how much further I could go before it found me again. The storm pushed me all the way back to the truck, like it wanted to bury me before anything else could. I slammed the door shut, breath shaking, hands stiff from the cold. The engine hesitated, then growled awake. Headlights cut through the whiteout, barely reaching 10 feet ahead. I didn't waste time. I turned onto the Glen Highway and drove fast enough the tires kept slipping, fast enough that the darkness looked like it was pulling me forward. I didn't look in the mirrors. I didn't dare. Every inch of me felt stretched thin, like the signal was tugging at my bones. After 30 minutes, the storm lightened. Shapes formed again. Trees, guardrails. A sign on the right side of the road. I slowed just enough to read it. Eagle River, 3 miles. I blinked hard. No. That can't be right. I'd been driving for half an hour in the opposite direction. Anchorage should have been getting closer, not Eagle River. I kept going. Maybe I'd taken the wrong turn. Maybe the storm had blinded me. Maybe the roads were rearranged from the ice. 20 minutes later, I saw another sign through the drifting snow. Eagle River, 3 miles. My stomach dropped. The snow on the windshield slid down in sheets, but it didn't look like snow anymore. It smeared and crawled, breaking apart into tiny squares, like pixels glitching on a broken screen. Each flake melted into static the moment it touched the glass. I wiped the fog away with my sleeve. The static didn't stop. My headlights swept across the forest to my left. The trees flickered, not swaying, not moving naturally. Flickering, patches of white snow blinking in and out like corrupted footage being overwritten. Something twisted in my chest. Not real, I muttered. This isn't real. This isn't... I reached for the radio. The moment my fingers touched the dial, the speakers exploded with static so dense it rattled the windows. Beneath the static, faint and warped, the broadcast looped the last thing I ever wanted to hear again. Frame 27. Over and over, endlessly resetting. The diver's breathing seeped through the static like water filling a room. Then the voice came, distorted, stretched, broken into digital shards. Loop confirmed. My hand froze on the wheel. No, please, no. I slammed the brakes. The truck skidded across the ice, fishtailed, and came to a stop sideways. My breath fogged the cabin in fast, panicked bursts. I looked ahead through the trembling headlights. The road bent to the right, then to the right again, then to the right again, an identical curve, and another, the same stretch of highway looping into itself like a perfect copy pasted over and over. My throat tightened. I didn't know where Anchorage was anymore. I didn't know where I was, or if where even existed past this point. There was no exit, No outside, just the signal waiting for my next breath. I leaned forward, forehead against the steering wheel, eyes burning. I should have known the road wouldn't take me anywhere. It's not a road anymore. It's the 27th frame, stretched into miles.